Good afternoon, everyone. I like everything to do with wood, and my name's Tim. And as I sit here and I see an empty row at the front, it reminds me of a time when I bought the pews from an old church in Westport, Ontario. Joe went to that church, and I took all the pews, the beautiful white ash pews built in the 1880s, and I was giving some away to different people. My sister-in-law wanted one, and she said, "Can you give me one from the front?" And I said, "Why?" She said, "It's never been used." And sure enough, there was no gum on it. There was nothing on it. It was the nicest pew in the bunch. So welcome to our fourth in a series of continuing education seminars we do for architects, designers, builders, and ourselves. We like to try and educate ourselves about what's happening in the wood industry. We love everything about wood. And our last seminar we did gave a broad outline of the forests in Canada and their health. How much do we cut? How much do insects get? How much do fire get? What is the health? Today we have with us Greg Smith from a company that we deal a lot with, Gilbert Smith Forest Products. They are celebrating their 70th anniversary, and they're in the interior of British Columbia. And if anyone's been there, they're in the North Thompson River, just north of Kamloops, British Columbia. And they are an interior cedar producer, and we're going to hear more about that company shortly. When I got into the wood business with my brother Phil, who was back there almost 30 years ago, we realized that we are using a lot of wood, and we wanted to make sure that we were using wood in a sustainable way. We often hear about wood as the ultimate renewable resource, and it's a sustainable way to build. I have learned in those years, after many trips to visit Greg and other foresters, that it takes a lot of work to make a forest renewable and sustainable, and we'll look more about that today. Interestingly enough, forests are a wonderful asset for us on a number of different levels. Most people don't know that trees are about 80% carbon. So trees take in carbon dioxide, keep the carbon, and get rid of the oxygen. So you'll hear often people talk about how forests clean the air, and they are a great carbon sink. So 80% of a tree is made out of carbon, interestingly enough. I always thought it was stuff sucking out of the ground, going up there and turning it into a great big tree. So trees can be a wonderful resource if they're handled properly and forests are managed well. Greg is a trained forester, and we'll talk more about how his company, which is a mill, but also has a forest management group that harvests, replants, and looks after the forest. He'll get into that in a big way. We at the Wood Source realize that our business is based on relationships, and we have, would you want to invite that lady in? It's based on relationships, and we excuse me, are you understand we have relationships with our customers who use our wood, and we have relationships with our suppliers or our mills that we buy the wood from. And we love to connect people with our customers, and we love to connect our customers with our suppliers. So today you're going to learn from Greg. As I said earlier, Greg's a trained forester who has for many years been in the forest management business, along with running a great big sawmill that generates wonderful product that we sell a lot of here. We talked about this a few months ago when trade war with the US began. We realized that a lot of our trade in wood is north-south, not so much as east-west. And we, Greg and the Wood Source and Gilbert Smith and other companies, want to try and get more east-west wood movement, less north-south wood movement. And you'll learn from Greg how important that north-south is and what can happen to a company when someone suddenly says they're going to add 40% to your tariffs and so on and so forth. So Greg, I'll turn it over to you. Greg will be doing a bunch of different phases in his talk. At the end of each section, we'll stop for questions so you can ask the question before you forget it. Greg, welcome, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks, Tim. All right, well, thank you very much. I got to get my high-tech clicker, dummy clicker, and like to get started. So first off, just want to thank the Wood Source and the attendees, both here present and online, in regards to the time commitment and just showing the interest of being able to come and learn a little bit about it. And I hope it's worth your credits. I am a professional forester and have to do professional development credits as well too. So Every once in a while, it's nice to be able to go out and hear something a little different and learn something that's relative to your business. So as Tim mentioned, we do a bit of an outline. Our company background, sustainable forestry, that's going to be kind of the meat of the discussion, the trade dispute, and then Indigenous partnerships. And throughout that, we'll have some opportunity from discussion or review. So the big thing, just want to quickly get into, and just in regards to our relationship with the wood source. In 1998, it's been quite a journey, and one of the things is when we get into this business, it's a people business, a relationship business, and being a family business, that connectivity and being able to work with another family business, it's unique, and it's special, especially when you starting to get into the generational aspect of it. So I appreciate that Tim's come out and took a look, and that's one of the unique things about the wood source. And we have other customers that aren't as connected to the market or as connected to the resource. And Tim and the team is very interested in, and that's shown with just coming for some field tours and just getting a better understanding. So Gilbert Smith Forest Products. Gilbert Smith, my grandfather, passed away. I'm the third generation, and we are located in Barrier, British Columbia, in kind of the southern portion of the traditional territory. Our business has been operating since 1955. We're a third generation sawmilling business, and my grandfather started it in the cedar pole business, and our family, I would say, is very vested in it, with uncles and aunts, brothers, sisters, different people involved in industry, in the pulp and paper, in manufacturing, sales, technology, policy, academia. My uncle was a professor at the University of British Columbia for 40 years. So when we get together, we talk shop, and that's just kind of how it rolls. And it's been a real joy to be in the business, and that kind of has the passion for the forest and the local community, and some of the things that we've tied into that as far as our core values of the company of safety, innovation, sustainability, integrity, and community. So Gilbert Smith. So this is our manufacturing site in Barrier. It's 28 acres. We provide Western red cedar to North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. We have about 85 direct employees. We have a single shift sawmill, single remanufacturing shift as well. And we produce about 39 million board feet annually. And we utilize a high level of technology in our manufacturing process. So something about the business, and just kind of touch base with it, is it's a very complex business dealing with an inbound material, as you look at it in one of those senses, and it being a natural product and coming off the landscape in areas where it's publicly owned lands. It brings a whole different dynamic to what you have to manage and look after. So you start right on that very front in far as being able to have the opportunity to be able to work on the lands, and then all the way through the usual things with business, employee retention, engagement, dealing with competition, a variety of things, all the way through the sales into a global marketplace, with trade relations, EUDR regulations, all those different things that you're dealing with. So there's lots going on that we have to manage. And as being a small company, you have to wear many hats because you're responsible for all those different aspects of it. And it can be challenging, whereas some of the larger companies, they have a different silo that's dealing with each one of those different segments with it. So part of that also, we're also a very capitally intensive business. In the last 10 years, we've invested about over $25 million in improving our business. And really what it is taking that shift into newer technologies, as well as transitioning into what was a larger log that our mill was cutting and into a smaller one, and trying to be able to increase the level of a term what we call is recovery. And that's really the business is taking a round inbound product and turning out rectangular products on the other side of it. So if you can do that effectively and efficiently, and as we go into smaller and smaller logs, those are some of those things that we need to do. On top of that, you know, we're embracing things that everybody's doing. We've just done an upgrade where we've implemented an AI vision grader. So we are training that, looking at different defects, looking at different items, and trying to be able to detect at high rates of speed products that can yield us more value and make sure we're making the right decisions. As well, it gives us flexibility when we want to change something. You don't have a whole retraining process. You can just do it quickly. And that's one of the things in our business today. There's always change. That's the most certain thing that we have is that change is going to happen. So that I could go into the mill and talk about all sorts of exciting things and show you all sorts of different pictures. But I wanted to kind of be able to get into the real big section next, and that's sustainability. But I certainly can answer some questions with it here. But what I've attached in the presentation is we did celebrate our 70th anniversary. We got a cover shot on the Canadian Forest Industries Journal and an article in the most recent issue. And so there's a link to that as well. One of our vendors for our dry kiln did a full video presentation of our facility and put together an interview for that. And so that link is attached. And then tied to our website also shows us a little bit more. Here. So I'm not sure just in regards to just general manufacturing or anything in regards to history or anything to that extent. If people have any questions, feel free to ask.
Greg, have you always been in that location?
Yes, yeah. So we've been in that location. That's where we started with the cedar pole yard. We would ship transmission poles, telephone poles. Minneapolis, Minnesota was our first big customer base that we'd load up poles. We also did pit props for mining, underground mining, and pilings and different things to that extent. Go ahead, sorry. So originally we were on a siding of the CN rail line, and so we had our own spur and everything to that extent. The evolution of rail traffic now, basically we couldn't generate enough rail cars to hook up, and CN basically said the maintenance on that spur connection and that switch is more than the revenue you are producing for us. We're not interested in your business. So if we want to go rail, we go to rail reload. We can also just go truck direct, as well as we can stuff containers and ship direct through containers. And some of our export products go through that way as well.
And I would just jump in. We used to get all our cedar by rail car, and we had a spur line that came onto our yard. But in 1999 or 2000, CP took the line out after offering it to the city, but they didn't take it. So sadly, if we want to get it by rail car, he has to put it on a truck, take it to a siding, put it on a train, get it to Smith Falls. We have to get a truck to Smith Falls, put it on a truck there and bring it here, and it's less efficient and more costly. So decisions we made 20, 30 years ago, we're paying for it now. And that's why the roads are so full of trucks.
Anything else?
Was that a which level of that decision?
So CP Rail, before they abandon a line, has to offer it to the municipality in the province, and did offer it. And they turned it down. And then they sold it to the municipality and turned it into a rail trail. And probably a couple of years after I die, someone's going to write an article in the paper, and the city's going to spend $12 billion to put a rail line in from here to Kempville, where it went to, or Prescott. And someone will say, hey, didn't there used to be a rail line here? Should have kept it. But it was made so the rail line, before they abandoned it, have to offer it to government, and government turned it down.
So yeah, so those are some of the items we had, and like I said, our 70th anniversary, and there's lots of good stuff, and yeah, pretty passionate about the business. So the next one we'll get into here is sustainable forestry, and this is a topic that is very dear to my heart. Beautiful cedar of picture of Western red cedar there. And really what I wanted to be able to get into when we talk about sustainable forestry and just even the business that we're in is that connectivity to the environment, to the land base, to the forest. And what's exciting and what drew me to being able to come out from BC and talk about this is I think it's a very unique opportunity and just in the roles that you're in the world of architecture, to be able to, take that feeling and be able to transform it into places that we work or where we play. And so we jump into that. To me, when we talk about, go to the next slide. When we go talk about that, where does sustainability start? Well, if we're going to start something with it, we need shelter. We're building stuff with wood, okay? And so if we didn't have wood as that material or that thought concept that we need to have shelter, we wouldn't be anywhere. But when we look at it a little bit more, you dig into kind of some of those things and how it makes you feel. And so there's this term of forest bathing. In the 80s, it came about in Japan. I'm sure it was out there well before that. But it's this therapeutic practice that involves spending time in the forest or natural environment. And it's just focusing on that sensory connection with to promote your well-being. And so yesterday, Tim and I were touring the countryside, looking at some different sawmills, and we stopped in and went for a walk in the forest. I'd say it was more forest sweating yesterday than it was forest bathing. Yeah. I think it kind of felt like a sauna experience, but anyhow, it's one of those that creates a memory, and we sell a lot of our product for saunas. Go figure on that front. So, which is kind of unique. But the pieces, as far as the fact that you get to take ideas and take nature and connect it and do that transformation, it's quite unique. And so this piece surrounding the biophilic design, the same thing, kind of a believer where you take that sensory feeling of being in the forest, and when you go indoors in your workplace or in your house, and if you can actually feel that sensory feeling as well too, of the warmth of wood, the smell of wood, and sometimes on a real hot, dry day, the crack, here it is there, right? It's a very unique experience and stuff. And so those elements, as far as connecting people with nature, and taking those elements and creating it into your spaces, I think is quite unique. And so those are two items, and connection with wood. It's all there in furniture, in art, and in our building landscapes. And where I look at it is just wood is good, and it's great, and it's a great product to be able to work with. So this to me is the starting point of a sustainable journey in regards to building with wood and that utilization of it. So then we jump into, okay, so we've established wood is good. We want to use it. It's fantastic. We bring all those elements indoors and all the rest of it. So we start with a harvest and planning and all the things that go into what we need to do to be able to plan that, figure out all the different values and aspects that we need to take in place in regards to the soil, the water, the wildlife, so on and so forth. And then the big question that people are always going, okay, this regeneration piece, what are we doing and how does that work? And so for us, again, it connects back to being able to work and do the things that we're doing where our employees live and work, where we recreate, and to be able to ensure that we're doing that in a sustainable manner. So sustainable forest means sustainable business. It's generational. The forests are generational, and I want our business to continue. So why would we not be wanting to take care of it and ensure that growth is there? And so that's a piece and a value that that we have. There's a social license that we have to operate under, and that's kind of that second part in the sustainable piece. So the regenerating forest, again, a lot of the discussion in regards to it. We do different things to kind of help with that. Prior to it became kind of a regulation, we took the step about 20 years ago to ensure that we were planting at the time of fertilization. So we use quite a unique thing called tea bag fertilizing. So every time we plant a tree, couple inches away, we put another slot in the ground and drop in a little tea bag. It's a slow release tea bag. And those first 3 to 4 years of the tree's life are the most challenging ones, where it's exposed to the most risk of drought or different things to that brush competition. And so if we can get that real good solid start at the very beginning of its life, then its journey is a lot higher probability to be able to grow up into a solid and robust new forest. So the other one, planting 3 different tree species. You hear all these different things about, oh, it's monocultures and all this. Don't believe it. We in British Columbia are planting resilient forests and trying to be able to see on the landscape as far as the different little microclimates and topographies and what we can be able to do with that. So I'll get your question at the end there with it. So we've planted about 15 million trees. Some of those photos we've got are showing some of our celebrations we had, but there's a lot surrounding that, from ensuring that we've collected the right seed, that we have enough, all that process. We're growing the trees to an acceptable size to be able to create that survivability. And tying into that is the next part that we go to, and that is one of these ones that's kind of forefront on our mind. And it resonated pretty loud and clear here a little while ago in regards to the smoke and what was happening in Manitoba and in Saskatchewan. Fortunately enough for British Columbia, so far our fire season has gone well this year, and we've had a fairly good batch of rain, so that's been good. But this is an example of a location close to where we are in 2023. And it's a very unique and interesting picture. And so we talk about, what are some of those things with forestry and planting, what we're doing. And here's an example of a mature forest, unharvested, untouched, and a regenerating forest that was logged and planted. And basically, raging crown fire, and got to the edge, dropped out of the forest, and basically put itself out. And so it's kind of an example of where we can reduce some of the impacts or the large order of magnitude with forest management. And so it is a tool that we utilize, and it's something that we still, being in this business and creating that sustainability, it is something on the landscape that there's sound practices associated with it. So one of the other ones, planting future forests to combat climate change. And so one of the things as foresters, and because it's generational, we're looking out, what's happening, what's going on with the climate, how are things changing. One of the biggest things that we've seen is we're getting more extreme drought events. And so drought events create these scenarios where a lot of trees where they were growing or where they were planting or certain species, they're kind of in a borderline condition. They lucked out, they had a really good, starting point, and then they were able to grow. And so then you look at that and go, well, should I plant that there for when we replace it? And the answer is, well, no, it's kind of a little bit what we call off-site. So what we've been doing is projecting and looking to kind of how things are going to get warmer or how things are going to get more extreme. And so we're watching really closely in regards to the species that we select, the retention of other trees, shade trees, more edge effect, selection harvesting, all those different things, the retention of deciduous species in the forest, more so where before we considered it a brush species and different things that we were trying to regenerate. So those are all kind of different aspects that we're looking at in regards to it. You kind of talk about trying to fireproof the stand a little bit, and that's by looking at some of those selections. Some of the things that we've had to do more recently here, where we've been trying to recover areas that have been burnt over, and sometimes it's a real extreme event that we've had in British Columbia. And one of the one is creating a microclimate, and so we do in our in some of the areas where we're planting, in some of the areas in the drier southern areas from where we are, where the mill is we'll do it's nothing glorious, but it's basically a large swale or a hole that we'll dig, and you plant the tree at the bottom of that, and it actually has a little small microclimate. It collects a little bit of moisture from the rain. It's a little bit out of the wind sometimes. It has a little bit, sometimes a little bit of shade around its roots. And that, just in those first couple of years, when you get some of those really extreme events, it'll actually make it through that period. And then as it gets a more expansive root system and all those things and gets established, it can start to weather some of those climatic changes that we're seeing as far as some of the extremes that are going on. So that's a piece that's kind of evolving, but as foresters, we've been kind of looking forward and trying to understand that as we move through this whole dynamic of things getting warmer. So we'll move into another part where we talk about sustainability, and then we can talk about, okay, well, sustainability, well, we've got this piece. Okay, well, is there the certification aspect to it? And so, yes, there is. We as a company work under the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, SFI, the responsible sourcing, as well as the program for the endorsement of forest certification. So that's our chain of custody, PFC chain of custody. And really what you can see there, the chain of custody is this third-party trail documentation process of, you get this forest certificate, you get through transport, through milling, and through the customer. It makes it to the job site saying that it's followed through on this chain of custody and it's coming from a sustainable product. So forest certification in Canada. So first off, before we even get to third-party certification, Canada is a very highly regulated, British Columbia is a very highly regulated environment that we work in for forestry and for what we're doing with it, with reliance on professional foresters, policy, legislation, regulation, all those different things that we already have that we're doing. And so when you look at a third-party certification process that overlays that, it's something that we really kind of felt that it's a bit unnecessary. And one of the ones that really speaks to that, it's quite unique, is we do a lot with First Nations, forest tenures, the nation that we're heavily connected with. And so their lands and their tenures and everything, they've not bought into forest certification. They refuse to do it. They refuse to go, why do we want a third-party person that's in Zurich or wherever it is going over and telling us what we've been doing on our lands and what we should be doing on our lands since time immemorial? So that right then and there just kind of speaks to this piece where we're sitting here in a room of architecture or architects. I know you've had, FSC, SFI, we got to get this spec, and everybody's kind of all balled up on which one's better. Well, you got to remember, these are three competing organizations or businesses that are competing for certification dollars. Okay, so it's just another layer that's been added that way. So is it a process? Yes, we follow it, we work with it, and the chain of custody is one that's, it's helped create some processes and procedures, and it shows kind of the continuity, and it does create a framework. But at the end of the day, we feel very comfortable with the forest policy and what is happening on the landscape, and we're quite comfortable with that. So when we talk about it, okay, well, if you have SFI, so there are some of these standards. They're really lock it down. We're doing it. The multi-species planting within a year. Different things that they talk about on sediment control or road deactivation, community and stakeholder consultation. We're doing that, all those things already, but it's just kind of going, are you doing that? Yes. And so there's a layer that's in there for us. And so so that's kind of on the, we're stepping through this sustainability pathway here. And so we working in the forest, we're bringing the timber out, and then we're bringing it into our milling facility. And that's where we go into the next step of what we talk about on the sustainability piece. And so in our manufacturing process, carbon emissions, reduction compliance. So in British Columbia, we still have a BC output-based pricing system. The consumer carbon tax, yes, it's gone, but on industry, it's still there. And we are fortunate, we're lower and so we're not manually put or required to go into, but we took an opt-in option. So we are below the 10,000 ton requirement, and so we said, you know what, we want to opt in and see where we are, see what we're doing. And so we basically, they established for the size of our business and our processing facility and what we're doing a carbon threshold, 1,200 tons of CO2, and through our audit process, we have another third-party verifier come in, go through, look at our processes, what we're doing, reporting out our consumption, our fuels, and all those different things. And we achieved about 36% of our limit of what they established. So that then and there creates this delta to be able to sell some carbon credits. This is our first year that we've jumped into this. This fall, we'll get the final determination from the government, and we'll see if it really does mean anything in regards to is it a revenue stream, or what is it? Is it something to do with, you know, just kind of that sustainability piece? But we'll find out. But it's something that again takes up a fair bit of time and understanding as a small business to try and understand what that whole process would be. So how did we actually create that delta? Well, some of those things, as far as British Columbia, very similar to Quebec in regards to hydroelectricity generation. We're very fortunate to be able to have a renewable electrical generating in our grid. And so we actually chose, we do not have natural gas, and we looked at different options in regards to propane and so forth. And we switched into and went to a fully electric dry kiln. And so it's a dehumidification kiln. And what's very unique about our system is we run an energy monitoring system. So we're actually monitoring the production and consumption in the mill. And so we can see what's going on with it as far as our load. And we can tailor how we want to dry our wood, and we can kind of optimize our energy usage with that. The second thing tied to it is our manufacturing facility and kind of our remanufacturing and sorting side of the business are connected with a conveyor. And so traditionally there's a lot of diesel forklifts that are picking up the stacked wood and moving it into the next facility and batch processes and all the rest of that. And we're actually doing that kind of in a real-time environment with our process that we've put in place. And that enables a significant reduction in our fuel consumption. And lastly, what we've done is we've been able to, with our sorting system that we have, is target select the products that are best suited for green or dry products. And so we'll sort them according to width, length, dimension, and be able to go, okay, well, this is what we want for a kiln batch, and we'll optimize it that way. And so those other products that we have for some garden boxes or pergolas, gazebos, fences, some of those outdoor structures that sometimes don't need drying, we can establish that with a green marketplace and reduce some of that energy of the movement and all that processing required for doing a dry product. So those are some of those things that we've kind of put together to be able to create that delta on the carbon offset credit side. So we jump into then, okay, so that's in the manufacturing. Okay, so the actual product of wood, and Tim alluded to it in regards to this, as far as forests, when we create new trees, pulls carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. And so here's a little bit of I pulled some data from the Western Red Cedar Lumber Association, and just looking at some of the energy uses, greenhouse gas, solid waste, all the different things between wood, steel, and concrete. I'm sure you're aware of it, but this is just more information, just kind of bringing this home. The other thing that we've done and subscribed to are the environmental product declarations. So that's really just your guiding piece of kind of going, okay, what is the cradle to grave process, all those pieces that are associated with that, what goes into this product. And so I've left a link in connection on the site here. We've opted into contributing to that. We did the first set that are still active right now, and we're just waiting for a renewal to that. We did another whole data set collection and input into the process, and we're just waiting for the new EDPs to come out. So we keep going through that. Those are comes from the wood through the mill. Wood is good. And then it's going, okay, well, what else is going on with wood, and what's kind of this forward-looking evolution with things? And so here's a picture, and it's really pretty straightforward. This would have been a top of a log left in a slash pile from years ago. And then this is that same size of piece that we've now been able to change our specs down to be able to recover, because now we've put the technology in place to be able to actually turn that into a piece of wood. I'm not saying it's lumber, because this piece actually is specifically sized and dimensioned for an input product for an engineered wood product. And so it's kind of an oddball size, no different that we actually generate and produce a 2x5. And it's not really a common size dimension, but there are some trees that the perfect size of wood that fits in there to get the most utilization out is 2x5. Well, when you take that and glue it together with other products and mix it in different ways that we're doing in the engineered world space, you can see on the right-hand side, there's a picture of a block of finger jointed wood that then's been further processed in and created into a fully engineered 6x6 product. So we have a very good supply relationship with a company that is doing this process. And we actually have gone back right into the woods to go, okay, if we go to this type of log, through this type of process, and we make these types of products, we can drive that all the way through and be able to get more utilization and create some amazing engineered wood products. So that's kind of a real kind of that manufacturing piece as far as the journey through sustainability and kind of where we get to on the product side of things. So I've included some links in regards to some stuff to SFI, PFC, as well as there's a sustainability piece on the Western Red Cedar site, and there's links to the current EPDs that are available there. And then there is also a link to a whole section on dealing and designing with the biophilic concepts. There is an AIA white paper discussion on that whole process, and there's quite a few resources that you might find interesting there. So, you had a question?
Yes, I was wondering if you were able to harvest any of the
Oh, so yeah, good question. Yeah, the answer is yes. We have been able to. The challenges are the interesting piece, that picture that was there, and this is one of these debates that we have in the province of BC in regards to it, and it was from a lightning strike, and it turned into one of the most destructive fires that we've had in recent years in regards to the destruction of a bunch of areas around Scotch Creek and different things around the Shuswap Lakes area. And it was a lightning strike, and the first lightning strike you looked at it said no resource values in threat. And it's one of these ones where you're looking at that going, okay, no resource value. So in other words, it is a low fire on the ranking list of where it's going to be. So it smoldered and burned, and it was in an area that was very difficult to access, so it needed air support and different things. But it was in one of these visual areas that we saved and preserved that landscape because it was on the side of a lake for visual aesthetics. And so that's what was a bit of the hypocrisy going, okay, well, we reserved it. We're not going to harvest or do any of that. There's very little access to it because of a value of visual landscape. But in the ranking of a fire, human property is the number one thing, and infrastructure. And so that's how they ranked it. Well, it just kept burning and burning and turned into a massive conflagration and a very, very destructive fire that happened at the end of things. So that fire burnt a lot of areas around rock cliffs and rock bands, stuff that was not necessarily in the land base that we would consider where we would be able to harvest from. The areas where it did burn, so like adjacent to where that plantation was, there was an established road there and different things, they would have been able to salvage those areas for sure. And then it also comes to the intensity of the fires, how hot they burn, and whether or not there is salvageable timber left. And then lastly, it's the world of bureaucracy, how fast the policy and the procedures and getting through it to be able to actually salvage wood. And in British Columbia, it is a slow moving process, so very difficult to be able to get that. And
The bugs kick in before they go.
well, two things happen. The bugs kick in, the bark has already been compromised in different things, and the tree's been impacted, and then the wood cracks and splits. And then suddenly the value of that wood is severely impacted. And so yeah, the answer is yes, and we are trying to regenerate a lot of that as much as we can. This fire was particularly devastating as well too, because there was quite a few Indigenous nations forestry tenures that they had, that some of them were completely obliterated. There was just nothing left, and and some of their communities as well burnt up. So it was a real extreme event.
You will occasionally hear open a cedar deck board or something, and on the one edge of a deck board or something, you'll see charred from a fire, and you see the able to harvest it from. So once it's being milled, sawn and milled, it's undistinguishable from an on when they get to catch it quickly enough.
Yes.
But this image makes me wonder, raise the question, that if cedar is the most valuable, that if a harvested and then it's replanted, I assume it's cedar, but if areas have another species valuable, there's another area that will happen that, I mean, are we developing a monoculture? What happens to maintain a variety of species?
You came in a few minutes late.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He'll explain it.
Yeah, so we are planting multiple species. I mean, like when you look at this forest, this is this is Mother Nature. It's already done this, right? This is a pure stand of cedar. And it's kind of funny, you look in the back here, there's already some old stumps of things that have blown down or different things over time. And so we're planting multi-species. That's the 3 species is our minimum that we plant. And so cedar doesn't now normally grow in large tracts. It'll have smaller pockets, very specific kind of microclimates where it likes to grow. So those areas, we'll be targeting those areas with heavier amounts of cedar, but you'll still put in some other species to kind of just create that variety with it. And areas where there might not have been cedar, but you know, for whatever reason, there was some different competition or whatever could have happened, we can plant cedar in those as well too, as long as we know like the aspect and the moisture content and all that is going to be able to support the growth of
The
cedar.
soil condition is going to support it.
Correct.
We have a question online.
2 things. When you're asked a question, could you repeat it to the online audience here? And then we have a question. Could you explain the difference between SFI and FSC certification?
Well, I like one more than the other. No, there's how to get into it. I'm not an expert on the whole piece. The interesting part, SFI, there's more of a public input piece to it, and then when you get into the FSC component of it, I think it's more of a top-down, regulated, driven process, and so those are some of those kind of differentials with it. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, like large tracts of the Amazon are certified under FSC, okay, and so you kind of get your head around that in regards to what that certification base is, and to kind of understand it. So there are some differential pieces in it. A lot of the part that kind of the prevalence of FSC has come about from the LEED certification process for building, and where LEED went down the pathway of going, you're only going to get a certified credit. They've opened it up now to answer more broad, but I think you get 2 credits if you're using if you're using FSC, and you only get 1 credit if it is from a certifying body. And that's kind of what's driven this bit of this FSC PFC which is better than the other. At the end of the day, I go back to the local land base and talk to our Indigenous communities, and to me, that's what matters, because that's the land that we're working on. So.
Thank you, Greg. Greg, a quick question before I'll get those two questions in a sec, but for all of us, would you mind sharing, sometimes you buy logs on the open market, but you have a forest management group and you have managed lands. I often visit you and there's a group of people poring over maps and getting ready to register a cut for a year or 2 years down the road. Could you explain the process of how you actually cut a piece of land? How do you decide how much to cut? When do you start planting seedlings? How does that all work?
All in 30 seconds?
I'll give you a minute.
Okay, so areas that we're not responsible, they're not our tenures. We still go through our chain of custody and SFI certification, we utilize a responsible sourcing document. So basically, you're on site, you're ensuring that they have a contract with the landowner of who it's registered to, and we have a process. And that starts the chain of custody piece as we go through. We take a look and see if that they are utilizing proper logging practices, so on and so forth. So that's kind of that open market aspect of it. So as far as our own portion of it, there's various things that we have to look after. And so we operate on the land base with a renewable forest license that we have been granted to us. We pay a rent fee to the province on an annual basis. And then for every cubic meter of wood that we cut, and to create that relative scale in your head of what a cubic meter is the size of a telephone pole, basically. So for every cubic meter we cut, we are putting a revenue as far as what's called stumpage back to the province. And as well, now there's new mechanisms in place that Indigenous people in their areas also have a piece of that stumpage revenue that goes back to them. So the planning process is years in advance. We have a planning forester. They look at all the policy regulations and requirements that we need to manage by. We're looking at different parts of the land base and looking at the forest through maps, GIS, and different areas. And we'll plan out a harvest area. Then we do a variety of referrals to trappers, fishing lodge owners, and then we'll do a larger aspect in regards to which is called an AOA, an archaeological overview assessment. And that's where
They're familiar with archaeological assessments for sure.
Yeah, so we have the same thing on our harvest sites. So the nation that you're dealing with, they usually have people that'll go out, do field assessments, reviews, and look for and be able to assess the site. Once we get through all those steps, then we start building the mapping and figuring out, how we're going to get the road there, what we're going to do, how we're going to regenerate it. And within about 2 years, we finally have an area that we would be able to get hopefully approved and start building the roads and getting ready for harvest.
And then after you do replanting, you plant the trees and that's it? Or are you responsible to make sure you have a healthy forest for a certain number of years?
Yes, so we are responsible. It is because we are on a volume-based tenure. There in British Columbia, there's 2 different types of tenures. One's an area-based and one's a volume-based. We don't have a fixed area, but we have an area, what we call an operating area. And so what happens with that is, we're responsible to regenerate the site. We do a variety of surveys right after planting, 3 years, 5 years, and monitor and watch how the site is growing. And then once we get to a established, the last survey is what's called free to grow. And basically the stand has gotten to a point that it is above 1.5 times the height of the competing brush that is around there. And it is well established with the right spacing and stalking standards. And then it basically reverts back to the crown and then goes back into, and it's part of then the calculation of what we called our annual allowable cut. And so it's in the model and it goes, okay, in another 40 years, it'll be ready for harvest, and it shows that growth.
So you're thinking always 2 years at least to plan a cut. You're responsible for another 7 or 8 years. It's a 10-year program. cutting one little area.
Yeah, it's longer than that
Wow.
usually. So 10 years would be on a really high productive, like nice kind of valley bottom type site. Where we're in more extreme sites, drier, or some of these tougher climates that we work in, you can easily be 20 to 25 years.
You're in for the long haul. Question. So the question was,
You go ahead.
is there a limit to how many times you can replant in an area? Do the soil, the root systems cause problems for future regeneration from 1, 2, or 3 previous cuts?
Well, you'd have to maybe go to Europe to look at that type of thing. They've been doing this a lot longer than we have in Canada. But in the coastal areas of BC, they're on some of their third rotations. And depending on some of the species, what we've seen is there isn't a real impact. Some of the areas you have to be careful that the pathogens from root rot or different things are still in the soil. So there's some things where you can switch up a little bit of the species or plant a little bit more of those species in with that to kind of help get through that period of time where those pathogens are still alive on and feeding on the old stumps. You can do different things. We call it stumping, where you'll turn them over and then expose those pathogens to the air and they dry out, and then the soil doesn't have that root rot in it. So there are some different things that you can do, but Mother Nature is a pretty resilient piece. I mean, like I look at it and go, well, 10,000 years before this was covered in ice. So when you see what we're growing as far as forests and all that, it's a pretty resilient environment.
I was kind of riffing on that. So are any of the trees that are being planted, are they hybridized? Like to what degree are trying to replicate exactly the species that were there, and are the trees generating?
So there's the seed is very highly regulated as far as what we need to do, and so I'll just ask you a simple question. You're growing your garden, and you look at your garden, and you're gonna decide that you don't want to go to the seed store and get seed for next year, and you've got a bunch of plants that go to head, and you've got one that looks pretty tough and sickly and all the rest of it. Which one are you going to pick? You're going to pick the one that has a nice flower, looks good, solid, robust. But that's the concept. Okay, so back that up, and so when we select trees that we then collect seed from, we're looking for trees that have some of those criteria, natural criteria that have the best form, vigor, shape, and they call it providence and different things to it. And also there's some trees that when we do whether or not they'll reject the germination tests. Some trees don't, they don't, they're a low germinator. So you'll take the seed and it'll be, 80%. So when you put those seeds into your little planting stock and start growing your trees, you don't get a very good yield from them. So some trees, they fertilize their seeds very well, and they have a very good establishment. So you have a high germination rate from them. Stuff. So those are all those things that we're selecting for and looking for to try and get the best tree on the landscape to be able to then use as our source seed supply.
But no genetic engineering or modification.
No. We're not doing some weird cross piece or something like that. And at the end of the day, I mean, nature with there's agriculture, farming, and all the rest of it. I mean, we talk about some of these things. We're going to have to step back and look in regards to climate change and growth. The world of agriculture, and can we actually grow food or whatever it is we're growing with less water, less requirements, and as long as we're not going off in in the weird things of mad science that everybody can conjure up in their head sometimes, there are some benefits to being able to figure out what are the best things that we need to do to be able to sustain our food supply systems and other systems that we have. Yes.
How do dead trees or deadfall factor in aspects of carbon, like sequestering carbon? How do you manage that? Is there a market for dead trees that decline on your property, or is your property like not to the extent that not the extent of the problem that you deal with, but curious, what do you do with deadfall or dead trees?
Okay, so yeah, the question is in regards to what do we do with deadfall or dead trees. So Mother Nature's no different. There's something than us, right? They pick up some disease or event, a windstorm. Tim and I were in the forest yesterday, and it's like, okay, there probably was an ice storm at about this year in these trees' lives because they're all forked right there, or different things like that, right? And that creates that opportunity for a pathogen to get in and then start to attack the tree. And so there's a kind of this epidemic portion of it. And so when you talk about epidemic, that was like the mountain pine beetle event that we had in British Columbia, where it was just taking out massive tracts of pine, which was, you know, a single species type stand. And based on the fact that we didn't have the sites broken up and kind of that fire management, that's a whole different story. But that's kind of the big aspect of it. But in like when we're going into our regular harvesting sites and different things like that, the dead trees, it depends kind of where they are in that process in their cycle. So we look at it sometimes. Well, it would be like red attack. So if we're harvesting in an area and you look and there's a red attack tree, so that's a tree that's just died very recently. It still has its needles on, but they've just turned red. So we would harvest that just like a regular green tree. There'd be really no difference to it. So we'd utilize that in the process. If it was already fallen down on the ground or anything like that, we would leave that there. We operate and there's guidelines as far as there's kind of a bio fuel or I get all, there's so many new terms now with it. So it's this kind of this organic amount of woody debris that is left. And so then that dead tree is already starting to decompose. There's already, you know, whatever, could be salamanders, could be all sorts of different things. So it's already got a bit of an environment. So that's something we would just leave behind on the forest floor. And then kind of there's a variation in between. You can't really leave a dead snag where you're operating if you have people that are planting or different things through windstorm or risk or something like that. You can do it, but you then need to certify. So if there was a nesting site or something quite valuable in that dead tree, we would identify that, put a safe work area, put some protocols in around it, and try and retain that feature, have some more green trees around it and different things. So there's a whole kind of dynamic that we can do, and dead trees are an important part in the forest, and they're important for that biodiversity aspect of it as well too.
Do you do any thinning cuts in any of your stands, or is it basically from free to grow to your second round of harvest?
So good question. So do we do any thinning cuts in regards to our first harvesting and the second? So that's something that we're starting to explore. The sites where we're at haven't quite got to that point where there's enough opportunity to be able to get into the stand for like a commercially viable product. One of the things I talk about hydroelectricity in British Columbia and in Quebec, it's very cheap. So when a lot of the things of these early entry stands where you're doing thinnings and cuttings, the economic model really hasn't been developed very well, because to be able to bring that small cutting or thinning out to be able to space the forest out and grind it up and use it for bioenergy fuel, the economics aren't there as well with it. But I can say my grandfather, so in the late 1920s and 30s, did a lot of cedar pole cutting in some of these stands. And so we've gone back in, we've got one out in front in a bit of a landscape area that we have of an old cedar tree that we think that it was he that cut it down. And we had trees grow up beside it, and we were able to harvest those as well too. And so we kind of have some second generation stuff that we've been doing. Any other questions?
Wondering, are you pushing that to the market, or is it just years or architects or building science people that are actually pushing that to the market?
So yeah, in regards to engineered wood, how's it getting pushed or out into the marketplace? Really, it's customer education, and it's getting people to understand, what are the values, where it comes from, and to be able to see, the comparisons to solid wood to something that is an engineered piece. And I mean, like, engineered wood's been around for a long time, with glue lam and lamination, cross-laminated timber. Just got back from a tour in Europe, and some of the CLT and some of the things that they're doing there is absolutely impressive what's going on. And we're just starting to get that transformation into Canada and British Columbia now. So I think as people get more comfortable with it, before it was like, oh, glue and all the rest of it, that's been tougher. The technology in the glue has gotten so much better now, and is I think that a lot of that is kind of fallen away to the wayside as far as people being suspicious of it, and there's some real beautiful products out there now.
There still is a lot of suspicion. So we sell 6x6 cedar, a fair bit of it. It comes from coastal wood. It's extremely expensive, and the fiber's not as great. You have to get punky knots in and so on. But the Ottawa market's been very reluctant to buy a 6x6 laminated STK 6x6, even though I think it'd be a much better product, dried, less checking, less splitting. But we're going to keep trying pushing that. We have a question online, but before we go to that, Greg, your mill, how much waste does it create? What do you do with the waste? And I think even in the 28 years I've been dealing with Gilbert Smith, you're using far more of a tree than we ever used to. But maybe tell us, a log that comes in, how much is waste, how much is left over after you finish, because you're getting some pretty small stuff out of it.
For sure. So the term we use, really, it's not waste. The old term used to be a byproduct, so it was like, okay, what's this other thing? But it's really, we call it a co-product. So we're looking at that tree and trying to be able to, one, maximize the most amount of lumber that we possibly can get out of it. And so, where I mentioned before in regards to a round input and rectangular output, that's where, by utilizing on the smallest trees, designing and developing products that are non-standard lumber products that then basically are just these blanks for gluing up. So when you look at a tree, kind of the old term, when you put it all together and take all the triangles out and stuff, it's close to that, 54%, 55% for wood. And so then the rest of it, there's 3 different streams that can go into, and one is wood chips for the pulp and paper industry. During COVID, we were deemed, because one, wood and shelter was deemed a mandatory essential service, essential product. So shelter. And then the second one, Western red cedar fiber, is actually used quite heavily in the medical garment, disposable medical garment industry, which we, I think, blew through every single one of them, and masks and garments during COVID. And so that was kind of one of those unique things. And it was just a sense of pride for the team and the crew that, we were doing our part to try and be able to keep things going at the early stages of the COVID outbreak. And so And the other part, sawdust. So our saws, we're on a constant journey to try and reduce what's called kerf. So the thinner we can saw a piece of wood with, as far as the size of our saw blade, the less sawdust we produce. That sawdust can go into wood pellet products or different things to that extent. And then the last one is the bark. Bark goes in different streams into landscape products, as well as into energy, where it'll go into generating bioenergy at a hydro generation plant.
Kyle, online.
Beyond just enhancing the use of wood products within our building, do you have any other recommendations you should be considering in the design community related to sustainable forestry?
That's a good question. It's just that showing that passion, that there's actually a material or substance that you can work with that is, that connection to nature, and that knowing that it comes from a responsible type forest managed system, that is renewable. You can make that connection that way, and being able to promote it well, that, and your conscience is clear, knowing that what we've got going on in British Columbia, and what we're doing in regards to creating shelter and creating spaces that people want to be into and are enjoyable.
Kyle, could you back the slideshow up, and I'll tell you when to stop. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Right there. So you're into some nice mountains here, and the pale green is where you've done a cut.
Yes.
On the side of the hill.
Yep.
So again, getting back to how you decide to cut an area, your team decides where to cut. Are you cutting 10% of the area, 1% of the land? How do you decide how big an area to cut? And are you thinking too about fire breaks and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, a lot of it, like that hillside over there, it's kind of tied to, it's quite steep, and just the engineering of the roads, the harvest systems using cables and different things to that aspect. So there's lots of parts and pieces on that hillside that's fairly challenging. So we're looking at all sorts of things as far as corridor connectivity for wildlife movement. Watching, looking for wind throw edges. There's a variety of those types of things that we're kind of looking for and trying to manage through. So the size and consideration, there's a lot of different factors that would go in there. Everything that we're doing, these are older cut blocks and different things, and it's everything's getting smaller. We're fitting in. There's kind of more form and shape. And so one of the things early in my career, or early in my educational experience at the University of British Columbia, I had a professor that talked about it, and talked about forestry. And I know everybody's flown over all sorts of places. You fly over British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and you'll see cut blocks from the sky. And some of them don't look that great. They're these big square rectangular things. But they are a new forest growing back up, and it's the evolution of policy. My dad still remembers when he was out in the field, and when he got back into field camp, they had a government directive, finally a letter, that said you are able to establish a cut block boundary on non-cardinal boundaries. And so that was the regulation laid into the 60s, saying you can only lay out a block north, south, east, or west. That's it. So when you look at it and go, well, why are all these square blocks? Well, that was the law.
Had to be a square block.
It was the evolution. And so they were pretty excited that they could lay out a block on a 45. It was quite a miraculous thing. And so when you look at that, my professor said, the profession of forestry is quite unique. And his comment was, lawyers hang their mistakes, doctors bury their mistakes, and foresters must live with their mistakes. It's on the landscape, and it's in that public space that you just can't get rid of it. Yeah. And so over time, forests are resilient. Some of those earlier openings and large tracts will start to be greening up. But on another aspect as well too, we saw it in our local area where we had some large fires come and hit some of these large openings that had been replanted, and they stopped. And that necessarily isn't a bad thing. So,
yep. So it's fascinating. If you're ever out in BC and you visit Greg, he'll take you up into the mountains. You're at 4,000 or 5,000 feet, and there's youngsters walking around clearing brush around the saplings. They're putting fertilizer in, and you see them grow. Dedicated group of women and men that just are like they live in this valley. They want it to look good. They do everything they can to make it look good. Just go forward again to the Adams Lake Fire. So this one, how old would the new growth area there be?
Good question, but just kind of looking in the relation to it, probably 25 years.
Yeah. You can see that new area completely stopped the fire. I also have noticed when I've been out visiting you, Greg, that in some of your cuts, you aren't clear cutting that contour area. If you see significant trees, you'll leave them. So someone has literally walked every square foot of that land in preparation for designing the cut.
Yeah, so now everything, they've walked it, we've mapped it, everybody has iPads, all the machine operators have geo-referenced maps, and they know where they are, they know what they're doing, they know where a stream is, they know certain trees that are of value, all the way down to certain plants that we want to protect in regards to some of the features in regards to Indigenous nations, all those different things. And so the openings sizes will vary. Some of the sites that we have, we've been able to, it's kind of one of these things where you're starting off. If you have a forest or a stand that is very structured, so you have trees at different levels of their life cycle. So you have younger ones, older ones, and taller, mature ones. Those are stands that create a really good opportunity to be able to create the types of openings where you can get really selective harvest and multi-layered type entries into it. Where we sometimes, we still have openings, we try and do it more in like patches or creating more edge, so we can create those transition environments. But there's some areas where the trees are all pretty much the same. They established at the same time. They established after some type of natural event, would have been a wildfire, landslide, anything like that. And so they're all quite the same height. And so those are tougher stands that when you open them up and try and do some of the selection harvesting, and where they are all, when they grew up, they said, well, we want to grow tall because we're a competing type species. We grow tall to the sky to get to the sun. And when we don't need to put as much support into our root systems because we're all here together. And so when you start doing, different types of thinnings or openings on that, you have to be careful with that, because you can suffer to a lot of blowdown or different events that can happen with that. So there's kind of a whole broad base event that you can do.
That's great. You were talking about monoculture. In the Ottawa area in the 1950s, the 60s, the NCC did a huge number of red pine plantations. So if you go walking in the Greenbelt often, you'll see 40, 50, 60-year-old red pines, and they're nothing growing underneath. And when you have a Dureco like we did in one area near Woodruff, it just knocked them all over because there was no variation and nothing underneath to support them. Any other questions before we move on? Yes.
You mentioned a couple of times about those harvested off trees. Have to bring those back to natural or
Yeah. So there's a few different things. So we try and plan like many years in advance. So when we're, sorry, the roads, did that get picked up, or road? Yeah. So roads, once we build the roads, do we do something with them afterwards? And so there's a couple things. And so we'll establish kind of the planning horizon and say, okay, well, this area where we're working, this road is actually going to be a main road. So we're establishing that, and we're very fortunate that we have a lot of that for access to the backwoods in BC. I mean, that's one thing. Like most areas where people go, oh, my favorite lake or my favorite place to backcountry ski or my favorite place to fish, Well, that got there from a forestry road usually to get into that resource area. And so we can't forget that. And so on our planning horizons, we'll look and see, okay, what is this road? What is the life? And so we can then build roads to different standards. So if we build and go, oh, actually, this is just a short little spur, this is one area that we're going to harvest, then we build it to a standard that we know that we're going to then be rehabilitating it. And so we'll build it, we'll do the replantation. We'll usually, it's all about kind of risk and kind of how long you want to hold that road open to make access easier for your crews to get in. But once we've kind of determined kind of within 5 years, it's like, oh yeah, you know what? That's pretty good. And so from there, we're either hiking in or flying in through those roads. And so then we will basically unbuild those roads, recontour them, and then they become part of the growing site again.
So you won't replant one year or take the road to the next. You have to wait till they're free to grow and everything's looking good, and then you'll pull it out if it's not needed, the road.
That's the most kind of common thing. We do some other ones where we know we're on a really sensitive site, slope stability or different things. That event may be higher risk usually on steep slopes. And so what we'll do with that is we'll go, okay, we know we're going to get rid of this road. So we'll log it in the wintertime on the frost and deep snow, and we'll actually build like a snow road into that area, do the harvest, and then basically pull that snow road apart, make sure everything is good with it. And then we're committed to having to fly the trees in, fly the planters in, fly the surveyors in, and basically regenerate, because that road, we deemed it was too much of a risk to be able to maintain that access.
I think there was another question. Yes.
Yeah, just related to the slide that you have up right now, forest fires, climate change, that's different stuff. So I work on the kind of southern Quebec area, which we're seeing pretty substantial forest composition regulations for moving the next 100 years. We're going to see various. I'm wondering if west you're seeing the same kind of situation where possibly a lot of the softwoods aren't necessarily going to be as successful, and are you kind of addressing that through diversification in any way? And you know, how is that kind of impacting, I guess, this side of things? I'm thinking of West Coast things in California, where they're now trying to find value in ponderosa pine, like a fire successful species. That's something you're dealing with here.
Yeah, for sure. So we kind of touched on that a little bit. The question being, are we? Yeah, the question being, are we looking at different species and different things in regards to the changes that we're seeing from climate change, or the warming of what's happening here? So the answer is yes. Certainly, we're looking at where we plant and what we're doing in the species as we progress further north. So you see some of those species. We're right on a kind of a transition piece with Western larch. So we are now kind of planting a little bit more of that in some areas. And again, we're working with our Indigenous stewards of the land, and that's one of those pieces as far as forward modeling to say larch probably will be a better species here, but larch has never been in the landscape where we are here. So it's that kind of getting around going, okay, well, do we want to introduce this new species and stuff? So it's not just well, we should plant larch. There's a lot of kind of working parts that we need to work on that. So certainly we are looking as far as where we plant and the species that we're using to kind of get really more specific to the kind of the microclimates that we're planting it in. The biggest one that if you look out on the landscape, and I'm sure you have it out here, we see it in British Columbia. And how I say it is, it's basically, it's a site that is, it's a borderline site. So if you look out, and I saw a lot of like rock outcrops and different things that you have that you can see out in I guess in the shield and different things, and you'll see that trees growing all the way around. You're like, oh, that's a pretty inhospitable site. And what will be the indicator that you see is after a big drought year, like you'll know that it's a real big drought year. You won't really see a bunch of dead trees out in the forest from the drought, but you'll see these rings around all these rock outcrops or different areas that are these real marginal tough sites. And that's kind of that piece going, okay, that tree got established there years ago, and it's kind of that borderline, you know, it probably had lucked out on a couple of good seasons and got some good rain, but now you're starting to see that, and it's going, when you're hitting some of these extreme heat periods for a long amount of time, this here is kind of a bit of a blip. It's those long 2, 3, 4 week or longer events that you can have that really dry things out.
Read about the impact that the species have on that lumber for like commodity markets. I'm just interested because the conversation earlier about mass timber, I was speaking with Element 5, and they actually buy their lumber from Europe because very wet for, and they don't sell to Element, but they won't mill it the way Element 5 wants. They buy their stuff from Europe, because I think it's kind of crazy scenario to be happening in the first place. And I asked them why, and their argument was that essentially Canadian kind of milling organization, they're not here with large scale massive mills. They're not looking kind of custom small scale kind of milling off or mill ups in a way. Maybe it's different on the West Coast. That was kind of comments on that.
I mean, as far as, I mean, wood is good. So we'll figure out with wood what we're, you know, different species at a time will be more abundant than others. And so as we transition, part of, like I talked about the AI vision grading, well, we're doing that so that we'll be able to harvest other species as well too, or manufacture other species and stuff. So you've got beautiful eastern white pine here. We have a small percentage of western white pine that we have available to us that we can do. So that will evolve. The conversation you're having with Element 5, to me, that's a business to business type relationship that they'll figure it out. So that's an example of something that doesn't work. Showing you a picture of a weird 2.5 by 3 sized kind of weird rectangular piece, and feeding that into an engineered wood products of a grade that we're specifically producing is a conversation of the business to business relation that is working. So they got to just figure that out.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll head on to the next section.
I'm gonna snag some water first.
Oh yes, and feel free to get up. There's lots of snacks, and Greg won't mind if you get up and grab something while you're here. There's coffee. We want to see all that food gone before you leave.
Yeah, because we're gonna get into the dry topic next here. We're gonna run through it pretty quick. So.
I'm not telling anyone to get a drink and a snack again. That was ridiculous. Welcome back, and we will have lots of time afterwards to chat. And we're going to turn it over to Greg now. He's going to talk a little bit about lumber trade in Canada and the U.S. and where we fit into that world.
All right. So yeah, good thing everybody's got a drink. We can be settled for one of the topics that gets my blood boiled. Thankfully, we turned the air conditioning on for this session, so it was getting a little warm before. So anyhow. Canadian lumber trade. We'll go, I mean, let's first off talk about trade and what is kind of the importance in regards to trade and sales to who is the largest customer is the United States. And so there's a quick little slide that just kind of shows a few BC stats in regards to the forest industry economic impact. So it's a major player in British Columbia. This slide, a year or two old. So it's shrunk a little bit, but it's still very significant. And when I talk about, you know, these are the big kind of large scale provincial type statistics, but when you're in a small community like we are, it's a big deal. It's a very important thing. We're the largest employer in the area, and it's important. We're one of the last remaining mills between ourselves and Prince George. So when you go up the Yellowhead Highway, so there's a lot of things as far as the importance to BC. The challenge that we look at is Western red cedar, the US, and just kind of understanding the market a little bit more. So Canada produces about 500 million board feet of Western red cedar. The United States does about the same. The US harvest has kind of been fairly static. The Canadian harvest has been dropping fairly significantly. So we've kind of stabilized at this level here. So we're both producing about equal portions. The significant piece is our exporting to the United States, and I'll get into that into the next slide. But when you look at a little bit of the difference, the Canadian, what we produce in Canada and British Columbia, so in Canada, it's really the only marketplace that's still producing clears, larger timbers, and a very significant component of STK type products. On the US side, they do very little clears. They do a bit of STK, but they do a lot of fencing. So in that Washington State, Oregon, Northern California, you get very fast growing cedar trees with really high taper. We call it in the industry brashy wood. So it's growth rings that, you know, are wider than your thumb, and knots that are gargantuan kind of thing. And so some of that timber works well when you cut it short, put it on a fence board, and it's a good way to utilize it that way. And so that's a lot of the US production that they do. So carrying on, you can see Canada, we consume about 13% of what we produce, and Western red cedar is produced in British Columbia. And so when you kind of get your head around that, 85% is going into the United States. So it's a significant marketplace for us. And we can do more to grow the Canadian business that we have. And when I look at it and we talk about it, and certainly on this trade file and everything, when we talk about local sourcing, well, Canada is local sourcing. And I think we have to look at East-West and really think of that concept going, okay, where are we sourcing this wood? What can we do? When I look at our tax remittance and where we send it, well, I think it's into the processing site is in New Brunswick. But anyhow, still the feeling is we're sending money to Ottawa and the area. And so this kind of back and forth trading relationship across provinces is important. So you can kind of see 2023 to 2024, what we were exporting into the US and some of those items. And so we are, you know, there is a global exporting market for Western red cedar, but traditionally it's always been a lot of clears and going into Europe. And that market adaptation has been a bit slow in regards to kind of changing what their thought processes are around for knotty cedar, around the durability aspect of it and some of those things. So there's lots of education that's going on with it. Where we're seeing a fair bit of traction, we're doing a good volume actually into the Czech Republic that we're exporting. And that's come about in Europe with the war that's going on and the sanctions and different things with European larch not being able to come out of Russia and those areas into the European marketplace. Western Canada has seen a pretty good uptick in regards to Western larch that we've been able to produce and go into Europe, as well as Douglas fir when they haven't been able to get as much larch. And then cedar, knotty cedar is kind of falling into that and being able to gain some traction. So we are trying to expand our marketplace into the, you know, that more of that global perspective with things as far as transitioning into more of a knotty product. But as far as in our own country, I think there's lots of opportunity to grow that. So Tim mentioned that you guys had talked about some of those things earlier on, and that kind of gives us a bit of a outline of what we have. So as far as the U.S.-Canadian lumber dispute, ever since we've been selling wood to the United States, we've been having a dispute about it. So that's pretty much an assurity. So you look at kind of what we've been dealing since the end of the last softwood lumber deal finished off. You can see the tariffs and different things that we have. So we have what's called a countervail duty and an anti-dumping duty, and they get added together. And those are kind of our tariff rates. So those are being held by the U.S. Commerce, and everything's under dispute. And so we constantly fight and are trying to get a settlement somehow. The current climate that we're in right now, politically, that settlement is going to be very, tougher to reach. The last time when we settled, we were able to get about 80% of the duty payments back, and 20% was kept and distributed to the U.S. Lumber industry that petitioned the government, and then a percentage of that went into actually a wood marketing program in the United States to grow the wood market. This settlement, if we can reach it, certainly probably will not be in that type of ratio. It's going to be certainly a more punitive for Canada. So all the things aside as regards to, Trump, Democrats, Republicans, all that, it doesn't matter who's in government. The CVD-AD lumber dispute's been going on through various terms of office. And the calculation that we're in that is that we're really coming to a head with is basically the post-COVID boom and then bust kind of thing. We called it the COVID hangover, where everybody accelerated 5 years of projects that they had pent up out in their backyard and did everything they imaginably could, and then stopped the next year saying, well, actually, I'm going to sit on my deck or look at my fence or grow my vegetables in my garden box that I did, or whatever it was. And so during that time frame, in the U.S. side and some of the building and different things, there's these calculated penalties of CVD and AD, and so we're currently at 14.4%, but potentially right at the end of July and in August, we're going to be facing a 34.4% duty payable on every stick that we ship into the United States. So, you're in the architect world, you can imagine of putting your billing together and going, well, now I got to figure out who's going to pay for this 34%. Is it going to be the customer? Is it going to be, my developer? Is it going to be me? How does that work? So that's what we're facing right now. On top of that, and this is more of the current political state in the U.S., is a U.S. Section 232 investigation whether a specific product in certain quantities, certain circumstances poses a threat to U.S. national security. Whose name is written all over that. Whether or not wood coming from Canada is threatening U.S. national security, that's a bit of a reach, along with the fentanyl that we must be stuffing inside it or whatever is going on. So anyhow, the challenge with this trade file is been difficult. And as an industry, we're going to just have to hunker down and try and figure out how to ride the storm out. So being innovative and being supportive kind of cross country in regards to what we're specifying and the products that we're using and different things to that extent is really, really key. So the gentleman, I'm not sure, yeah, there you are. I would be thinking that when you're talking about Element 5 bringing products in from Europe, that the local producers, that if they thought shipping to the US was easy, well, it's gotten a lot harder. So they'll figure it out. The market will respond to being able to go, do we figure out a specific grade of product or do we just face putting a generic grade into the US and getting a punitive penalty of 34%. So that's kind of the piece in regards to the lumber dispute. It's there. We live with it, and we're trying to just figure it out. But it's a real threat to our industry right now. Any questions? I didn't really have any links to send you. Where it would have been better to send you to, I don't know, True Social or something like that if you wanted to go there. But we'll avoid that site. Okay.
Greg, quick question for you. So you ship a load of lumber to a customer in Texas. When it crosses the border, you're paying that fee?
Yes.
And you are billing your customer for it?
No. So we are right now it's this negotiation type piece. So is it kind of built into the price a little bit? You would look at it, but there isn't a line item of 14.45% duty on that piece. So as we kind of get into that point, that's where it's going to be. When it went from 8 to 14.5, we had different discussions about it. When we got to 25 for those 3 days of chaos of, I don't know, what was it, Independence Day or some whatever day of greatness, that we talked about what can we do, is there a way to share a third? So kind of a third to the end user, a third to the developer, the distributor on the other side of the border, and we'll take a third. And so that's some of those things that we're going to have to all share the burden. At the end of the day, the U.S. consumer is going to pay more for their house. That's what's going to happen.
And so right now, the 14% or whatever, you have to pay that to some U.S. government agency?
Yeah, so to get our export permit papers, we are basically registered as the import of record, and then that we use tariff codes to be able to, wood follows a certain tariff code, and then as we get our paper to cross the border, then we have to put up this percentage of the duty.
And you think sometime in August, likely it's going to jump to 34%?
Yeah, it's calculated. The Department of Commerce is mandated to get their determination. Usually they have 180 days to do their determination if they apply for the extension. They applied for an extension, but they actually only applied for 27 days or something like that. So that was a real going, wow, okay, they're real serious about trying to actually get their work done. Okay. And that's just from pressure from up top, saying you better get your calculations done quick.
Okay, so very complicated, stressful, and hard for a business like yours that exports. How much of your wood do you export to the States?
Well, at the end of the day, there's a component where we're not doing it directly into the U.S. About, again, that kind of 85% is going there, but it's through various channels.
Sure.
And so there may be another remanufacturer that's doing something with our wood, and then they're taking some of that, and it's going to Canada or going offshore, and then going to the United States that way. So, then component to Europe, and then direct into the U.S.
Okay. Any other questions on that file?
Well, you had all the questions.
Yes.
Any government saying build, baby, build. Is there any hope that will be enough or adequate to hopefully weather the storm for the mills that are going to have to deal with this 34% trade issue related stuff? Like, are we gonna lose more mills, therefore our own lumber will get more?
How to predict?
Like, are you seeing incentives to buy Canadian lumber?
Yeah, certainly there is, but I mean, like if I was to tell you okay, well, let's go build right now, by the time, your development permit, this, and this, we'll have midterms already come and gone and all the rest of the things. Yeah. So it's pretty tough. So just that general piece of being able to grow and spec the marketplace and try and reduce barriers as far as east and west, that's important. And yeah, we're going to have to just hunker down and weather the storm, and try and figure out, will there be some mills? Yeah, there will be some mills that will not be able to handle the cash requirements and that impact to be able to weather the storm. We're preparing right now. We're trying to drive our inventory levels to as lowest levels as possible and basically build a war chest to try and get through this piece of the challenge. And so where that'll be is really kind of trying to figure out how to turn our inventories and keep things moving enough, hopefully into the Canadian and the export market, to be able to keep our mills operating until we can settle this dispute. The U.S. still, it's our biggest consumer. It's a very important marketplace to us. And they like our wood, and they need our wood. There isn't the ability to be able to suddenly turn on this massive manufacturing and harvesting requirement in the United States to be able to fulfill that need that they're looking for. And when we look at Western red cedar, it's a species that's been caught up in a trade dispute that's really about structural lumber, not not a design type piece or an appearance grade type product that we're talking about.
Cedar's not a commodity like SPF.
Correct.
Question online?
With the increased duties, will the surplus of available domestic lumber
Good question.
I'll jump in
There's
there.
always that pressure that goes on as far as what may go across the line. What'll happen with some of that is there will be just a balance that will occur. So suddenly mills will shut, and that balance, because there'll be a threshold that you just can't operate at and continues, sustaining losses. We're already at a pretty low point in the lumber and bumping along the bottom of the barrel right now. Tim talks about, we look at some of the prices of lumber that we're dealing with now and historic over time, and you compare that to the other building materials that you're utilizing and using now, and it's astronomical how low or how little appreciation we've had. We've had these weird spikes of COVID, but as far as that baseline value of wood for all that we do and all the things that it takes to be able to get wood from the forest and into a building, I feel it's undervalued.
Yeah, in 30 years, the price of Western red cedar in some areas is doubled. In 30 years, house prices have quadrupled, food prices have quadrupled or quintupled, and cedar's been fighting it. So for the person who asked that question, you would think that would happen, but they'll just reduce the supply because so much goes to the States. Mills will shut, mills will close. They just won't be able to do it. So there's not much room to go down any lower.
Okay. So we'll jump into the last section, one that is really kind of another piece on the sustainability side of things. And Tim wanted me to talk a little bit about Indigenous partnerships. And so this is a pretty exciting slide. So my dad, a lot younger years, in the red shirt over there, we were celebrating I think our 3 millionth tree or something, and this one here on the left is the 13th millionth tree. And so we had a bit of a celebration and got out in the woods. And the fellow that's standing beside my dad here on the left, it's pretty unique. Years ago, he used to work in the mill, and after high school, or during high school and after high school, and then came back and he'd been logging and doing different things, and approached my dad and said, "Hey, I'm thinking of buying a truck, and I want to go hauling logs and stuff." And my dad was talking to him and knew him from work, and he's like, "Well, yeah, sure. I mean, like we got a spot for you if you want to try it out." And so he was our first Indigenous contractor, entrepreneur, and it's just kind of grown that from there. And so that relationship has been really key with our family, and I can certainly share a bit of history with it. So our biggest relationship that we have is with Simpcw First Nation and the people of the rivers. And so our connection with our business, we have a MOU, or a memorandum of understanding, with the nation, and we've had that for almost 20 years. But as far as a family relationship, as far as working and back and forth employment in the community, it's been over 115 years. So we do a lot of things with Simpcw. The shared access to forest tenures, they have forest tenures that they've transferred to us. They have their own forest tenures that we buy through fiber agreements. Direct and indirect employment opportunities in regards to entrepreneurial members of the band, as well as we have a large workforce all across, from in the skilled trades into general positions and into management of some of the roles, as far as Simpcw members or other Indigenous members of other nations. So we do things in regards to joint reforestation efforts, where we do some contract work for them. They do contract work for us. And then we just participate. We live and play in the same community. Simpcw, they have lots of basketball coaches, members, very highly oriented the nation to actually sport and education. And education is a real big piece for the nation. And so it's another aspect that our relationship is kind of unique in the sense that Simp would have been seen as a very dominant nation in as far as their territory, and so as an operator, we're very fortunate. So when you look at it, down at the very bottom corner is the community of Chuchua. So they used to have villages further up. They've got lots of history in regards to basically a mass transfer from one of their communities further north down to this one centralized one. But they were a good defender of their territory. So when you talk to different things in regards to overlap, there's a lot of challenges for a lot of operators and people in different parts of the province where they may have 6 or 7 nations that are all claiming that same territory. We're very fortunate that Simp was able to really defend that territory and be the prominent figure in that. So that's been key to be able to formulate that, but also just living and working in the community together and spending time riding the school bus, coaching, playing on ball teams together. We're heavily engaged with it, and so that's been certainly unique. So another part of this, when we talk about it, Simp's another nation. Look at the size of the amount of area that they have. Are they FSC certified? No, that's that type of thing, right? This is their nation. They operate under what are called the 6 directives that they've established for their management plan as far as how they're managing their nation. And they have the pieces surrounding that are water, cultural uses, medicine, plants and trees, wildlife, their archaeological sites, and just the Simp people in the valley and community. And so those 6 directives ensure the protection of the land, the wildlife, and their people. And that is kind of our overlapping layer on our forest management stewardship that we need to work under, having that guiding principle. So the nation is a very progressive nation. They've been able to build a lot of capacity to be able to develop those types of principles and get them in a form and a piece where other tenure holders and people that are on their territory can be able to go, okay, well, I want to be able to do something, and then those are those principles that you follow and work through. So that's our biggest connection, and it's one of the ones that I feel very proud of and work and play and we do lots together. So in BC, that it's a bit different if people aren't aware in regards to there was a lot of treaty settlements out in the east here, where in BC there was a lot of non-treaty. It never happened in that sense, or the land was never ceded, and so part of that is learning Truth and Reconciliation Day and understanding some of the things in regards to some of the things that happen to Indigenous people. And we take that time with our crews and do education, as well as ourselves internally. I'll get into it a little bit later. We do some of the training and understanding as well. So we have another nation that we work with called the Adams Lake Indian Band. It's a little bit further south and east of where we are. That overlaps some of our tenure area as well. And this is one that we've worked on another process, and it was kind of tied to what we're calling a bit of a Sequemic supply chain. So Sequemic is the large group of nations in the area, the Shuswap area, and Adams Lake Indian Band is one of those nations. And so ourselves, Adams Lake, and Woodtone, the producer of some of the mass timber products or the engineered wood products, we formed this joint venture, and it really came out of I went to school with a member of the Adams Lake Indian Band when we went to university together, and being able to develop those connections and relationships. And like I said, family businesses or the wood business is a lot about relationships and connections. And so Dave phoned me up out of the blue, and he's like, hey, we're looking at a little door shim reman plant kind of thing about doing door and window shims. What do you think? Do you want to come and look? The guy can't seem to get enough wood. Do you think you'd have some? And I was like, well, I don't know. I said, let's go take a look at that. And so we got together and explored, looked at the plant, looked at the fiber that they needed and all the rest of it. And I was like, wow, if we really want to develop something here, I think there's a stronger pathway to go down the road of the engineered wood products and what we're doing with it and stuff. And so we formulated this joint venture, and I'll just flip forward. It came through an MOU that we developed, and so sitting down with the council and learning about people, you know, working on a business plan and trying to kind of scope out the concept of what we wanted to do. So we'll just go back, and what that was really was, Adams Lake Indian Band has forest tenures. They have cedar on it. We buy that wood. It comes into our mill. We process it. Part of the grading and trimming processes, we have trim ends. Normally those trim ends would be either collected for some engineered wood products that we were collecting and shipping offshore, or they get ground up into chips to go into the pulp mill for paper. So we'd be extracting those products, creating a stacked rough pile, and then shipping it, as you can see, really where this is kind of the Sequemic Nation with it, and the Adams Lake Indian Band is kind of situated down in this area is kind of where they are sitting. But how it connects is from our mill, from where they are and to where Woodtone is. We would ship our product there, and part of this was to have on reserve employment within working distance walking distance from the community. And we're working on setting up this reman plant. And what that plant is going to be, we'll be doing is processing, chopping, ripping, and grading, and making finger joint ready blocks that then we can then ship to Woodtone, which is a little further down in a different nation's territory, but where their plant is located, and then that's where they'll finger joint it together and put it into face glue products. So that's kind of a piece that we're working on. We've established our MOU. We've done some grant writing, received some funding. We've got our building, we've got our lunchrooms and paving, and we're just getting ready to get the equipment inside there and finalize the final details. And this fall, winter, we'll be starting to train and start this new venture. So it's been something that's been quite exciting, and it's taken a lot of work. This is one of these ones, we started this in kind of 2020, 2021, and it just takes a long time to get to fruition. But the original 3 people that were involved in it are still working to get it to that point where we can really feel proud to have an operating plant and this Sequemic supply chain of connecting the forest all the way through to a finished product. And Adams Lake would actually have their people would have a viable piece and a piece of the action with it. So elk sweat means coming together, and that's the nation actually pulled that name together from their traditional language. And that's really the 3 partners as far as how we're coming together. But also it has significance in the fact that we're doing finger joint products and that we're joining those together and stuff. So it was a really neat connection piece to be able to do that then. So Indigenous partnership discussions, I've kind of put a connection on here for SIMP to go to their nation and to go to Adams Lake Indian Band, and you can get to their site. The bands they develop, some bands are further along than others. One of the challenges with the Adams Lake Indian Band, they hadn't really developed an economic development arm aspect that you can work with, where SIMP has a very, very strong economic development arm. They do a variety of things, all the way to being a major player in the Trans Mountain Pipeline, to doing all sorts of looking at early mining exploration, CN rail, track extensions, all those different things that could impact them in their nation. They have a say, and they have a piece of the action in what they're working with. The last one down here is a link to basically some Indigenous corporate training. And so just understanding, working with Indigenous nations and trying to figure out some of the nuances or complexities, it's good to kind of get some knowledge base with it. And what I would suggest is kind of before you go out to kind of a corporate trainer who is very good and all the rest of it, but is reach out to the nations that you may be involved with or overlapped and ask, one, do they have some of the capacity? Do they have a language or cultural department? That's how we do in our own workforce. We'll have the nation come down and they have language and cultural teachers that are trying to maintain the language and just give that history and some of the things that are important. So that's kind of that first option. It would be able to reach out to the community. Do they have that capacity? And or can they recommend somebody? And that's really kind of the first part of that, creating that Indigenous connection is ask and figure out what you need to be able to do. If you aren't able to be able to achieve that or figure that piece out, then yeah, just getting a general understanding, some of the training that's available as well. But that's one of the pieces. It's an area of the business that I spend a lot of time on, and I enjoy it. And like I said, it's that relationship piece that you have. It's a generational piece, and that aligns very well with family businesses or just that human aspect. Wood is a very tangible thing that nations can look at. It was very important part of their culture. The utilization of it. And so when they look at some of those things and they understand the value and they want to be able to be a part of it and participate with it. So any questions? Okay, so jump into a few closing remarks. So this is pulling together a group of architects and certainly some of the people from Wood Source to be able to support that, and ourselves as a vendor to be able to supply and support Tim from Wood Source. We belong to a marketing group called the Western Red Cedar Lumber Association, and that's where that's kind of the area that we utilize to help with EPDs or market intel, dealing with some of the items surrounding maybe fire codes in the California area or whatever it could be that we deal with. We work through it. And one of the books that they put out is the Cedar book, and there's a few copies that we have available. But it's one of those ones that when we talked about going out into Mother Nature and being able to bring that feeling of outside in and being able to connect to nature, and then showcasing some of that Western Red Cedar or some of those products in that natural environment and how you feel. At the end of the day, it's kind of like, how do you feel when you're around that? And so there are, we'll get to it when we get into some questions. We can go to the next one there. Is kind of the takeaways. And what I want to look at is so yeah, the Canadian forest practices, we are heavily managed and regulated. So the certification piece, everything on top of that, it's a very complex business. Western Red Cedar markets, we are heavily reliant on the U.S. Lumber demand. So there are opportunities to grow the Canadian consumption to benefit us all. Canada is local, that statement of it. And then wood and Western Red Cedar continues to be a leader in both socially and environmentally sustainable building materials. And that's, tying that connection, the Indigenous connection to the land and partnerships in the community and business, that's really important. And that's a big piece now in understanding this business environment that we're in and some of the ties to this sustainability. So want to thank you for taking the time and hope it was worth your while to be able to learn and understand. And we'll take some questions here. And while we're doing that, it'll cycle through the digital copy of the book that's showcasing some pretty exciting pieces of architectural work all around the world that's been showcasing Western Red Cedar. So,
Greg, before we go to questions, I want to thank you very much for coming here. It's always a pleasure. And the emphasis on partnerships, again, we want to be partners with our customers as we want to be partners with our suppliers. And we love our suppliers to meet our customers. And I think you did a great job doing that today. And hopefully, coming out of this, you realize how complex and difficult it is to get a nice piece of Western Red Cedar decking here for you to buy. And the care that a company like Gilbert Smith Forest Products takes in bringing that piece of cedar to us. It's amazing the effort that goes into doing it, the love of what they do. And any of you who head to BC, let me know and I'll connect you with Greg, and you'd love to see their mill and learn more about what they do. So thank you very much. So any questions about what we've heard today? Yes.
Are architects able to join the WRCLA?
Yes, they are. There's a registration process, I believe, if you go online, and I think it's based on a firm base for number of firms, and it's you get access to some of the resources, and the other part of it, there's a very good image page that has lots of different images on it, and ISD's page and stuff, and so.
There's lots of good specification
Yeah.
information on there too.
And it's extremely reasonable.
Yes.
As far as
Yeah.
the sign up fee.
Greg, I have a question about the pine beetle infestation that occurred and devastated a lot of the pine forest species. So, a few questions. So, I think that was largely lodgepole pine that affected.
Yes.
And so, what portion of the lodgepole pine forest is wiped out? Are they being replanted? What will prevent that from happening again? Are there any things that the forestry industry can do to protect against something like that happening?
So the question in regards to mountain pine beetle, kind of what has happened and what are we doing now? And so, yeah, a lot of the British Columbia was trying to manage under this point of a sustainable annual allowable cut. So you basically stand the timber up, what's growing, what you're harvesting, and trying to hold a large component of the timber in reserve to be able to kind of meter it out each year. Pine forests, they are a fire regenerating forest. They usually burn up. If you look at the history and what goes on with them, why there's large forests of pine out there is because there were large fires that burnt a lot of those large forests of pine. So what basically our forest firefighting policy of trying to put fires out created this environment where we had a lot of mature pine, and the mountain pine beetle loves continuous mountain pine forests that are mature, and basically we got this cycle that created this epidemic, and so it did significant damage to the stands, and it killed a lot of the forests. The unique thing about pine is, yes, we did a lot of salvaging for it. A lot of the pine was on the west of the Williams Lake, Quesnel area out in the Chilcotin Plateau. That's a very dry site. And surprisingly enough, the value of those trees stayed quite strong for a long period of time. So there was a lot of harvest that was able to salvage it. So basically double to where we are now in our cut in the province of around 40 million cubic meters to it was about 80 million cubic meters during those times, trying to salvage whatever pine we could with it. Through technology, we were also able to utilize some of those stands that got cracked and destroyed and were not worth in lumber, but we were to put those into oriented strand board. And then as time, like they're still salvaging for 20 years after some of these stands, which was created this kind of mixed forest. So we had a lot of stands as we were harvesting at different times that created these different age groups, which was a benefit to us to be able to get that across the landscape. And so the last harvesting was really around some of the bioenergy stuff. So they were able to recover, get some products for OSB or a little bit of wood, and then a lot of it was just into biomass. So those sites are certainly all regenerated now and are growing. And some of the earlier stands are now actually in some of the higher productive sites are getting into some of the thinning. Pine is a serial pioneering, and it's a very fast growing species. So there are some of those stands that they're able to start thinning and get that back into it. So that, pine board or ESLP, right now it's really switched heavily to spruce. but the lodgepole pine aspect of that should start to transition in 5, 10, and 20 years back into a bit more of a pine harvest.
All right. Any other questions? So we'll be hanging around. Feel free to stay around and chat if you like. If you have any more questions for Greg, but thank you for taking time out of a summer afternoon to come here and listen. And again, hopefully you've learned a little bit more about the lumber industry, a little bit more about Canadian forests, and maybe learned a little bit more about how complicated it is to manage a forest. And when you think of wood being the ultimate renewable resource, it does take time and effort to make it truly renewable in a sustainable way.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.